thank you very much for joining us here in Leeds today for what I know will be a brilliant conversation. We're here to talk about something that really is at the intersection of climate, cost of living, and of public health and trust. And that's about home decarbonisation and how we engage consumers in that. Before we get into introductions, just to scene set a little bit. I think we hear a lot about gigawatts and heat pump targets and retrofit numbers, but actually we know that the government's Warm Homes Plan will succeed and fail on something much simpler. And that is whether people want it, whether they feel a tangible and relatable benefit from it, but also whether they trust it. And this isn't about abstract policy, it's about people in future being able to turn the heat on in their homes without worry that they can pay the bill. So we've got a huge scale of change. We've got to have mass retrofit to achieve that. We've got to have mass behaviour change. But we know the reality for consumers is there's a huge amount of uncertainty. I mean, less than a week ago, they were told your energy bills are going down. Then over the weekend and the events that occurred, that's likely to reverse and quite dramatically. So how do we give people confidence? How do we make sure we're engaging them in the right way, not as an afterthought? And how do we really know what's working already, what we should be doing more of, but also acknowledging what we're not doing well today? So to have that conversation, I've got some fantastic panellists with me today. Just to introduce myself first and foremost, whilst I shuffle these cards around. I'm Laura Sharp, and I lead our customer and operations practice for energy and utilities at KPMG UK. But I'm joined by, we'll do this in the right order, Andrew Spencer on the far right. That's Andrew is the Strategic Solutions and Partnerships Director at Equans UK and Ireland. We have Jess McNeil joining us as the Head of Home Energy from the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. We have Jim Bennett, Low Carbon Director at Octopus Energy. And last but not least, David Glew, Director of the Leeds Sustainability Institute at Leeds Beckett University. Right, without further ado, we'll get going. Setting the scene. What problem are we really solving for the homeowner? Is it warmth? Is it bills, health, or hassle reduction? And I'll come to you first, Jim, for that.
Okay, thanks for that, Laura. I think it's interesting. The Warm Homes Plan is big in sort of scale and its intent. I think there's a few people out there that wish it would kick in a little bit quicker. Which we can talk about in terms of when it will have immediate effect. But in terms of what they're trying to do, there is a clue in the title with the Warm Homes Plan, and I sort of segment it into two different sort of sections. I think the first one is, and we mustn't forget this, is all about climate change. Octopus wears its sort of green heart on its sleeve, if you like, and if you look at the stats, whichever way you want to look at it, and the one I always refer to is the hottest 10 years on record have been the last 10 years. Yeah, it's a real challenge. So we do need to get some impetus and some policy direction, and the government putting the money where the mouth is, and the Warm Homes Plan absolutely does that from a climate change perspective. And I think that's the big overarching piece that they're trying to drive. But the only way you get people to move is to make it real for them. And I think there's a big, strong social justice element, which I'm a big fan of. And I kind of split that down into sort of three pieces. There's three sort of crises going on all at once. I think, number one, there is a housing crisis. I think I've just seen a stat that I'm still trying to get my head around, which Jim McQuaid just showed in the Innovation Hub, which is if you go from the centre of Leeds to Wetherby, your life expectancy goes up 10 years. It's not just a bus ride. You will live for 10 years longer in terms of the life expectation at either end of that particular journey. And you look at all the stats around the housing piece, we've got 135,000 people living in temporary accommodation, households, of which 175,000 children live in temporary accommodation. And here in Leeds, that figure has gone up by 23% from 24 to 25. So, you look at the Maslow hierarchy of needs, and shelter's right and warmth is right down there at the bottom. It definitely is trying to fight the housing crisis by getting more homes out there for people to live in. Another good stat, back in the 50s, we were building 200,000 social houses. Last year, we built 10,000. If you get rid of right to buy and demolitions, we actually reduced the social housing stock by 4%. So there's a housing crisis. So that's one of the things we're doing under the social justice banner. I think the second one is the health crisis. There are different health outcomes. I've just mentioned the Weatherby life expectancy piece, the air quality piece. We've introduced a law called AWAB's law to try and put an onus on stopping people dying from respiratory disease. Think of it in those terms. There's a clear issue there. And then the last one is the cost of living crisis. Money is tight and people need their money to go further. So anything that the Warm Homes Plan can do to create more houses that are warm, decarbonised and are good to live in, and also reduce the bills, that helps fight the cost of living crisis. So I think it's climate change, social justice, and then underneath that, there's a myriad of more detailed challenges, which I'm sure we'll get into, Laura.
Thank you. Couldn't agree more. So, Andrew, I'm going to come to you just to hear your thoughts on what we think the biggest barrier is to homeowner uptake and what's the most effective lever you've seen to overcome it.
Try this one. Lovely. Technical issues, as always. So for us, when we speak to our partners and our clients, often cost is cited as the biggest barrier. We don't believe that's true. In actual fact, it's perceived risk is the biggest issue, and not understanding the value of these projects and these schemes can create. And that is basically down to language, as Jim has just touched on. And understanding the value in the system is the true way of unlocking these schemes. So for us, these schemes are highly complex. When we talk about it, multi-technology, they are multi-installers in that system also. So for us, it's about creating a simplicity around that for our customers and our customers' customers. So for us, when we start to talk about this, as Jim touched on, you talk about health outcomes, you talk about warm homes, and that's a policy shift that has been welcomed by us as Equans, I should say, rather than just talking about decarbonisation is where we were sort of 2 years ago or so. So the levers for us, and the biggest lever for us, is creating local place-based decarbonisation. So the schemes where we've seen the biggest uptake have been backed by local authorities, but also community-led. Whilst we are a huge global company, we're actually a regional company at its heart. So we employ local people to work on these projects, but we also employ local SMEs into that market. So what that means is the people that are turning up to those homes are trusted. They are from that community, they speak the same language, and that's really important unlocking this going forward. The other thing for us is, as I touched on earlier, we talked around data and elements of that, is understanding the outcomes of the work that we do. So we often talk about heat pumps installed or solar panels installed. So what? What does that actually mean to the tenants that are living in these properties? So the shift that is needed to start to talk about outcomes and impacts, and that really will drive the transition forward.
Thank you. Jess, I'm going to come to you now. How can we make these decarbonising technologies, Andrew just talked about heat pumps and what have you, feel like a financial win for households rather than a policy requirement?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. If I can, I'm just going to go back to a couple of points that Jim mentioned, if Please. I can as well. And firstly, just really set the scene from a West Yorkshire perspective. So in West Yorkshire, we have just over 1 million homes across the region. And we know that of those homes, the way that we heat them using fossil fuels is generating about 30% of our carbon emissions in the region. So Home Energy West Yorkshire is a dedicated service area within the Combined Authority where we're working towards addressing that. Initially, the government funding is wholly going into social housing, but we do have some products that I'll come on to talk about. But just a stark fact, adding to some of the stats that Jim mentioned, which is really quite worrying, 28% of residents in West Yorkshire have one of the 4 main health respiratory diseases that is caused by living in a damp and cold home. Now, for those of you that were here this morning to see how passionate the Mayor is about West Yorkshire, that is something that she absolutely, and none of us want to see continue. So coming back to that point around the warm homes, the health benefits here really do need to stand out and shine. And that's largely what we're trying to do in the work that we're doing. Because, yes, there is a financial win, but it's much broader than that. It's the health, it's the well-being, it's the warmth, it's the comfort of people's homes that will come from making these changes into their home. We're trying to get people into the mindset, as we often do, how we see a new bathroom or a new kitchen. They are home improvements. Solar, heat pump, insulation are all just that. So how do we get people thinking in that mindset that there is a financial element to it, as there is with everything that we do to our home, but it's those long-term benefits that they generate, that healthy place to live, the warm place to live. We've done some work with some comms and marketing partner to really change the way that we use language. In the Combined Authority, we're very comfortable in the transport field, but in this sector, it's people's homes, it's their place of safety, it's their place of comfort. And we were really interested when we did some initial data. If we use the words net zero and climate, it really turns people away from engaging and having a conversation. So we need to understand how we can sell the benefits, the financial savings, and the investments into their well-being by undertaking these measures. We do have financial products, as we've noted, that financial barriers are a big factor for people not looking to engage or being nervous to commit. So we have financial products and schemes that we've tried to reduce those barriers. We have a low interest loan, 3.26%, where residents can borrow between £5,000 and £25,000, pay back over 10 years. There's no penalty if they pay back earlier. And those can be for energy efficient measures to improve their home. We have just concluded, but we're about to start with an enhanced product of a collective buying scheme. And that's where we have taken homeowners, 645 homeowners came forward, and the way that it worked was with a collective buying power. They, on average, saved about 43% of installation costs for solar PV and batteries, and those 645 homes are now collectively saving £400,000 per annum on their annual bills. So it's that data, it's that information, it's that strength of confidence that we can try and give to homeowners to see that there is a financial win at the end of it. And just finally from me, we have just before Christmas, early December, launched a customer advice service, and that's a free and transparent service for all residents and landlords within West Yorkshire. And they can come via phone, online. We do provide a face-to-face service also, where they get a tailored, bespoke service for their home, that they can understand what works or what measures would be better for their home to make it more efficient. They're given estimated costs of doing that work, and then talked through if they're eligible for grants or for the further support. We then offer an end-to-end service as well, where we can signpost them to trusted installers. So it's all that support, language, education, raising awareness of the financial wins that undertaking energy efficiency measures to homes can bring.
Thank you. And brilliant to hear about what West Yorkshire Combined Authority is doing. I think we've touched on it a fair bit around the affordability and the funding. We know that the cost of living crisis is here to stay and will be for the foreseeable. David, I'm going to come to you next. Curious as to your thoughts on which funding and financial models have shown the greatest promise in making upgrades affordable.
Better? There we go. Thanks. Okay, so hi everybody. So the research team that I lead at Leeds Beckett University has been looking at building performance and energy use in homes for 35 years. And the last 10 years, we started to focus on retrofit. So I normally attend these and talk about the technical issues. We've been asked to talk about finance today and customers, and we do some research on that too. And the first thing really, it's kind of been covered. So retrofit, When you think about all the benefits it brings the nation, it reduces fuel poverty, it stops us having mouldy homes, it helps us decarbonise the grid. It's actually a really cheap thing for the government to do, for the nation. But as an individual, it's a very expensive thing to do. That's a market failure, and that's why we have very low uptake of retrofits that are taking place in the UK. So we need things to help solve that, and finance is one of those. So what types of finance models are there? Well, there's green mortgages, green loans, if you like. Now, we've done some research on this as well. They're great. They're not very popular, and the research we found shows they tend to benefit rich people in big homes. So that's fine, that's a market, but there's a structural issue there, you can't scale that. But also there's an ethics sort of issue there too. Other models we've got then are property-linked finance. So that solves the problem of, what if I move home, I'm going to end up lumbered with this debt for a house I don't own, which is great. So it stops that from happening, it stays with the house. It brings in the problem of, well, can I sell my home? This has now got an additional sort of perceived debt towards it. You might have heard some pay-as-you-save type of funding models. Some people call this energy as a service. So here, what happens is a company comes in, you don't pay anything, they retrofit your house, and instead of paying your energy bill to your energy provider, you now pay it to them. So they gamble on making enough savings to take a bit of a profit away from that, from what you're paying them. So, and that's good too, but there's some problems with that, because often we find when we measure homes, there's actually a performance gap. So the the company who came in didn't actually make as many savings as they thought they were going to. That could be for lots of reasons. Maybe it was so cold in your homes, you never actually used to use the heating. So when they did the calculations, they thought you were going to save money, but now it's really cheap to use your energy. You turn the heating on and you don't make the savings. That's the rebound effect. It could be the pre-bound effect, where the models that they used to predict how much energy was going to be saved, they had some assumptions in there that weren't great. They didn't use real data to make those predictions, and they end up not making the savings. So there's a financial risk there for that sort of model. Then we've got things like carbon offsetting, which is controversial in some areas, but you can have companies who protect a forest in an area, and they offset their emissions that they have in their processes by doing so. You could do the same model by retrofitting communities. So they could take the carbon savings as theirs, so they would come and pay for that. There's not very much of that happening, but HACT, the social housing charity, they have a mechanism to do that. Then we come into the government. So we've got monetary policy. Now, there isn't really any monetary policy for retrofit. We do have an idea that stamp duty could be targeted, where you have a rebate for high-performing homes, and then obviously a sort of a disincentive surcharge for poor-performing homes at the point in which you're making a massive financial commitment. And we found it's the best time to actually start thinking about making big changes to your home. So that doesn't exist, but there's a mechanism there. And then the fiscal policy, and that's the warm homes. So that's where we are, which is what we're kind of talking about today. So the problem with this is the majority of all retrofit activity has been funded through fiscal policy. So these are actually very short-term policies. They're the parliamentary life cycle. And for an industry, it's a very volatile environment in which to try and grow a supply chain and a skill sets. And that is obviously been brought home by the scrapping of eco very rapidly, and resulting in estimates of 20, 30, maybe up to 50, 60,000 job losses across the industry, which in another area would be a huge national scandal, but there's some politics around that. So we need some financial, those financial models, but some of them we've done some research into, and we feel we've got these kind of 4 things that a finance mechanism has to have. First up, it's got to be affordable, and there's been some talk about this already, and that doesn't mean it's going to save you lots of money. It means the upfront cost is low or zero cost. That's the key point. The hassle-free, simple. That has been something that we've done some research with York Council and other councils. The benefits have to outweigh the disruption. It's a hugely disruptive thing to have some people come and make changes to your home, especially if you don't feel in control. So that's one of the key things that you're going to have. And working on that handover process, don't just do it and walk away. There's real turn-offs for customers. You can't build a finance model without that. They've got to be desirable. EV cars are desirable. We need heat pumps and PV and all these things to be as desirable as that. They've got to be like people wanting them. So we've got to do that by stop selling it on it's going to save you money or it's good for climate change. There's genuine benefits around health improvements. You're not going to have mouldy homes. It's going to be a warm, warmer in the winter, cooler in the summer, best place for bringing your kids up. Those are the actual benefits of retrofitting that we need to start selling on. And then there has to be consumer protection. So the National Audit Office report, which many of you will have seen, has done a lot of harm around the insulation industry. There's a lot of lack of trust there. And this is the area in which my research team do loads of research on. What happens when retrofits go wrong? How can you start to learn from that and collect data to make sure that doesn't happen in funded schemes? So there are some, how do we protect customers? There's some easy things that we already do. We have warranties on products, we have competency person schemes, we have standards like PAS and MCS, and these are great, but these frameworks, they don't guarantee outcomes. So they don't build the trust that we're talking about. We need to do some harder things around consumer protection. So we need to do really good quality evaluation and monitoring, and that's where schemes have previously fallen short. So you can't build a finance mechanism off an issue which doesn't have that trust embedded in it. So those are the things. So there's loads of finance models that you can choose from. None of them have really taken off. They have to have the four things of being affordable, simple, desirable, and above all, being trustworthy. So that's the challenge that someone has to solve, you know.
Thank you. And I think fair to say from that, there's got to be carrot, but there's also got to be an element of stick, right? I think there's a bit of a theme that's come out of the conversation as well around community and local place-based approaches. I'm just curious, Jess, given your role, if you could talk a bit about what successful local delivery looks like, if you have a microphone that works.
I think so? Yes, great. Absolutely. I'll just, if I can as well, just touch on a couple of other points that we've just covered. As David had said, absolutely, the way that the current government funding comes to us is Warm Homes Social Housing Fund, and prior to that it was a Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, and they are generally 3 yearly cycles of funding that come through ourselves, and then we support that funding out through to our registered local housing providers. Those 3-year windows are just wholly insufficient and not at all time valuable for us to get to the scale of retrofit that we need across our social homes. So in West Yorkshire, we have about 181,000 social homes to date, although not all need retrofit measures, it should be said. Through the previous rounds of funding, we've delivered retrofit measures to about 4,400, and through the Warm Homes funding that we've secured up to 2028, we will deliver retrofit measures to about an additional 5,200. Even when those schemes are fully funded, there's no cost to the resident at all. We are still seeing a 26% refusal rate, and that's largely down to some of the things that David has just said. The number of surveys that have to happen beforehand, the intrusiveness to people's homes. Social home tenants are some of our most vulnerable tenants. How are we working with them to ensure that they are supported, engaged, understand the process that we'll be looking for them to go through in their homes? So that communication, that engagement, that marketing of clear message, having trusted voices, resident liaison officers on the ground is really, really valuable. And just another thing I just wanted to touch on around the financial products, as we've touched on. There is reference to a loan in the Warm Homes plan. It's reference to a 0 or a low interest % loan, but there's still so much uncertainty around timescales, whether that will be a national product or a regional product. We have some really strong evidence on our regional product. It's a pilot at the moment. We are launching a much larger revolving fund later this year, but we've got 1.5 million available to residents, and we've lent out about 809,000 so far to deliver retrofit measures, as I noted before. So where we do give residents the tools and the choices, they are willing and wanting to engage. I do take David's point. This is largely where residents can afford to act and engage on those two elements. So it's how we can expand and build on that. But just in terms of what looks good in local communities, it's very different in different communities. And we really need to be mindful of the breadth and depth of our communities across West Yorkshire and our region, and that will be the same across all of the regions that you all individually come from. For example, in Leeds alone, there are 170 individual languages spoken. So how do we engage across all of those communities that we're not leaving anybody behind, that everybody has the opportunity to be involved? We've done a lot of work with our ABS schemes, our area-based schemes. They are pilots, they are small scale, less than 100, but we've been testing innovative technology, we've been testing engagement approaches, we've been testing marketing approaches through those, and we've got a lot of learning for those that we can then start to scale up for our larger schemes, where again in the Warm Homes Plan it's very much looking towards street by street, area-based, multi-tenure, blending of funding approaches. So we'll be learning a lot from that, and we've got a couple in early development phases where we're looking at minimum 500 units. We did some schemes last year where we worked with our hard to reach communities, those that didn't have English as a first language or were inaccessible to technology or online, and that gave us a lot of information around what they're looking for, how do they want to engage. So that will be blended into our Home Energy West Yorkshire plan that's currently in draft, and that's a long-term vision taking us up to 2038. But some of those examples that I've given there are really varied, and you know, at the extremes ends of social housing tenants to owner-occupiers and private landlords. But coming back to that messaging around health and well-being, again reflecting what the Mayor said, you know, she was asked to give one sentence around what's your thoughts on priority. I'm a mother, you know, I've got children, you know, we are here to help for the next generation. So what is it that we can do in order that we can encourage those local communities to come to the table and be involved and make informed decisions that they can then take away?
Thank you. Before we come to our last question, I just wanted to let everyone in the audience know there will be opportunity to ask questions yourselves to our panellists here. So please do have a think. But just to close us out, I think a really good conversation so far, thank you. A lot of things that resonate. I think we all can admit that the scale at which we are doing this and the pace at which we are doing this is not sufficient to meet our collective goal. I'm going to come to each of you and just ask if there was kind of one thing we were to do, if it was policy, process, perception, to double that consumer uptake in the next 12 months, what would it be? And I'll come to you, Andrew, first.
Might just be me, actually. Oh, no, it is working. So for me, really, it's the touch around language, as we've spoken about. Shifting to an impact and outcome approach around this will shift the dial. It also allows, we spoke about the financial elements earlier, it allows a different style of investment alongside this once we shift that language into those outcomes. When we look at the sort of fiscal approach that we talked about in the grant schemes, once you shift to health outcomes and a much wider impact, government can then look at the wider approach to financing these schemes. So that's
Thank you. Jess?
Yeah, you touched on it, Laura. Obviously, events at the weekend will have an ongoing and greater impact. But one of the things that I would say is rebalancing energy costs in terms of electrification. We know the benefits of having some of this infrastructure in people's homes, but the costs, certainly for electricity at the moment, is outweighing those benefits, and that is a real negative element. And if I can, I would also say long-term policy certainty. the combined authority have committed to be net zero by 2038, but previous governments have changed their policy stance and changed some of their own target dates, and that really weakens our ability to stand firm on our approach. And if there is a national policy and a national awareness of commitment to those targets, it's much easier for us to bring forward some of our projects and programmes.
Thank you. Jim?
Bit of audience participation, just to check you're all still out there. How many people in here have got renewable tech in their house of any description? Could even be a heat pump, washing machine. How many people out there are Octopus Energy customers? Yep, there's a lot out there. I'm going to go for the triumvirate just for the lols. Anybody support Middlesbrough? Good on you. Up the borough. But the point I'm trying to make is this. The reason why people come to Octopus is it makes it very easy to try and do the right thing. Yeah, people want to do the right thing by the climate. And by coming to Octopus, you know you're getting green energy, and it's from a company that believes it. And then you've got these smart tariffs that enable you to get low energy overnight to charge your car, to heat your home with a heat pump, whatever it may be. The single biggest thing that I think we need to do is you need to get companies putting their money where the mouth is and taking risk and putting out there innovative products. So I'm going to use the David Glue scale of simplicity. I normally have the 3 Ps. Is it good for the planet? Is it good for the person? Is it good for the pocket? That's how we design things at Octopus. But I'm going to go with yours, David. So we've got a solution called Tenant Power. What Tenant Power does is we work with housing associations and councils, and if they put in solar panels and a battery, we guarantee that that tenant will have reduced bills by 30% year round. Guaranteed. So back to the trust. Is it something that they trust? Well, it's Octopus. We're a big company and we're guaranteeing 30% off their bills. Is it easy and hassle-free? Well, yes, because you work with the council and the housing association to put the low carbon tech in place. Is it affordable? Well, I've just said that we reduced the bills. Keir Starmer's trying to get 150 quid off everybody's bills by moving various tariffs and levies around. This gets 30% off. It is for the tenant, but the other good thing with this is we guarantee an income stream for the council. So it's between £500 and £1,800 a year per house. So if you're looking at the cost of the solar and you're looking at the cost of the battery, you get a revenue stream to pay for that, and they get 30% off. And then the other one is it desirable? Well, we're getting huge take-up, and interestingly, the rate of people who are, I was amazed at 26%, but I get it. I probably shouldn't say this, but I had heat pump engineers around my house when I left this morning who were doing some tweaking to my system. There is disruption, but the tenants just live their life. They can turn on their heating, guilt-free, they get the health outcomes, and they know that they're saving that money year-round. Even when it's cold, with solar panels, you only save really the money in the summer, but you get it year-round. So I think the single biggest thing is these big, scalable solutions that make it easy for people to take up the challenge. And the other interesting bit, which is, I would agree with you, the single biggest thing is putting the pain onto gas, which kills the atmosphere, and actually make electricity a lot cheaper, because currently electricity is 4 times more expensive than gas. But take that to its sort of natural conclusion. If you are getting people taking on, tenant power, and they're living in these homes and they're getting the renewables bit for the planet, they're going to spread the word. They're going to say to other people, actually, the outcomes are worth it. And I think the take-up rate is very, very high. Because if you go to someone and say, we're going to disrupt your house and put a load of renewables in, what do I get? Well, your bill might be a bit lower. You're just not going to do it, right? And you've got a heat pump sat outside your house. If you say to them they're getting 30% off their bill, sign me up. So I think your 4 areas are a good one, and you should go round them. But it does involve energy companies coming up with solutions to get their customers to buy less energy. And it takes a certain type of thought process to sit down in a room and say, how do we get people to buy less? We've actually got a zero bills homes product. If you're a council and a housing association building a brand new house, we will guarantee that that house has no bills for 10 years. Somebody's probably saying, how do you do it? We sell the solar into the grid using smart technology every 30 minutes. And that money is used to cover the bill for zero bills for new build and to subsidise the bill for the tenant and provide a revenue stream for the council. but it does take a different type of thought process. And not everybody is up for putting themselves in the firing line, because you mentioned climate change and net zero. You know, it does turn people off and it gets politicised. But fighting the cost of living crisis, better health outcomes, fighting the housing crisis, anyone who argues with that, you've got to really question their viewpoint.
Thank you, Jim. David?
Go on. Thanks, Jim. I'll trademark that, shall I?
I think you should.
So my one thing, I'll quickly say the other thing that Jess mentioned, which is the longer term policy windows, or however you want it, reclassify retrofit as an infrastructure project and have decades worth of policy that you're committed to over time, and the industry will sort it. Okay, but that's not my one. I was just reinforcing that. The one that I would go for, I think, is you're an educated audience, so you perhaps aren't shocked by this, but nobody has to check that your house works. They sell it to you. It doesn't matter if it doesn't work. They've got no comeback. Same for your retrofit. Maybe a bit different with renewables, but for your fabric retrofit, it doesn't have to work. No one's going to check. I think we should start checking that stuff works, that we're paying for, that it's going to work really well. And once people are confident that they can come back and go, this didn't work, fix it, then we can start building models around. So that's, I think, the one thing. I think we need to check that the stuff we're doing is actually working. Is there another industry in the world where that actually no one checks to see if something works? You know, you can't buy a light bulb and it not turn on. You know, it's as simple as that, I think.
Thank you. Brilliant. So, oodles of innovation, making sure things are working, policy certainty, making sure we're changing the narrative to one that actually relates. Really good observations, thank you. I'm keen to come to our, oh wow, hands flying up already. I don't know if we've got a spare mic or if people are happy to shout out. We'll come to the gentleman. That's yourself, yeah.
Sorry. Brilliant. Normally it would be when we would have loads of volunteers.
Will suggest that there's more going on retrofitting social housing. I'm a council tenant in Leeds. A few years ago, I was working with some people from Leeds Sustainability Institute, in fact, to look at an experimental retrofit. And Leeds City Council were just very, very, very resistant. You'll say, I am opening up, really glad for people to test stuff in my house to reduce energy consumption and have monitoring and all that stuff. But my house is an EPCC, so nobody's interested. It's leaky as hell. I'm sitting there, I can feel the drafts through the window and everything. I've been doing bits of retrofit at my own expense. So, I think there's a bit of stepping up that needs doing. How can we get local authorities to be more open for the tenants that really are interested in doing retrofit and pushing the envelope and supporting them, not being told that, oh, I'm causing a problem because the underfloor insulation is going to have to be ripped out when I move out? Like, really? But yeah, and also as an Octopus customer as well, how can I get Leeds to get onto that scheme and get some solar panels?
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, that's a very fair point. What I didn't say, because it wasn't really needed to at the time, but just to be clear with others, the current funding from the government that we get, which is Warm Homes and Social Housing Decarb Fund previously, is very fixed in its what we can and can't spend it on. The main drivers are to get social homes to an EPCC level. So if you're already at that level, your homes are not eligible, and that's where the inconsistencies sit, in that, as you've just noted, it might be EPC on paper, but it may not be as energy efficient or as warm as it needs to be. And that's where there is a discord between we've said numerous times to DESNZ the current funding structure is not fit for purpose. We're putting measures on properties that aren't really those in most need because they fit the tick box exercise. So the West Yorkshire Combined Authority are closely following Greater Manchester and West Mids in that we will shortly be receiving integrated settlement, and the Warm Homes funding largely for that will come in April 2027, and that will, we hope, afford us a much more freedom and flexibility in terms of how we spend our funding, in that we are able to target those homes in most need and those that don't just tick the box from the government funding structures that we have to work within.
I'll chip a couple of things in. I'm not sure I can sort your house out, but Together Housing, based in Leeds, they've embraced tenant power and they're now rolling out across their estate. Also, the Penny Lane development, is it Penny Green? Penny Green development? They've gone for Zero Bills Homes in Leeds. Now, it just so happens that the guy who runs Zero Bills Homes and myself both live on the edge of Leeds. Is it coincidence? Don't know. But it's certainly... Leeds are certainly getting really involved in it, and there's a lot of advocacy there, and I think that's great. But I read in the West Yorkshire Combined Authority sort of decarbonisation plan a couple of interesting stats. There's 7.5 million Octopus customers, so you're clearly an advocate. There's 7.5 million advocates there. There's 5.5 million people in the Yorkshire and Humberside region, which I studied geography at Leeds, and so I'm still a geographer at heart. Basically, that's bigger than Ireland and Norway and the same size as Finland and Scotland. So actually, the region itself can make a huge, massive difference. So I think the key bit is keep your advocacy, keep your voice nice and loud. There will be stuff that comes down the line. But the line that I read was, we've got to retrofit the financial support in line with retrofitting homes. And so I echo what Jess is saying, which is that will catch up, but it's not quite there yet. But just because you're EPCC shouldn't mean that you get ruled out of doing improvements. And there's nothing worse than the draft. As a Yorkshireman myself, I just see money disappearing down the toilet, and it just makes you mad.
Go you can.
So, yeah, I guess EPCs are the starting point as well in this. So when we talk about data in the local, in government and what they're collating, as we move to sort of local area energy plans and regional energy plans alongside this, we're not looking at a home situation anymore. We're looking at an energy systems problem here as well. So as we step up into that energy systems problem, your house will be unlocked, I guess, in the future. It doesn't help right now, unfortunately, but that, it is coming in the near future, is what I would say.
Thank you. Brilliant. Oh, more hands. Right, I'll try and make my way around. I'll just come down into the middle here, if that's okay. Thank you. And then a couple more, and we'll let you go for lunch.
Thanks. I'm James from Engen. I actually live over in York, so relatively local as well. I've got two questions. One is, what can we learn from history? So things like the previous town gas and moving off town gas and big, large-scale energy transformations there, particularly from a customer perspective, or is the context just so different now that there's very little learning we can actually get from the past? My second question was around Jim's point on, let's push all the pain onto the gas side of things, and let's keep addressing the cost of living crisis. I just want to kind of question how compatible that is in a world where we've got 80% of the country currently still on gas.
Great.
I'll go with the first one, and it's a simple answer. If we can convince people to put an explosive gas into their house in the early 70s, I'm certain we can get people to electrify. That's the first answer. The second one's a bit more nuanced. David, do you want to have a go at the...
Yeah, I'll do them. It'd be great. So town gas is a little bit different because people didn't have decent homes. They often didn't even have any gas. They didn't have any central heating or anything like that. So it was an easier sell. And town gas, of course, was going to be free because we found the North Sea gas, and you're never going to pay a bill in your lives again. So there's a big difference there in terms of people being willing to get this amazing thing that they've never had before and it was going to be free. And the world's a different place now. So the second one on kind of everyone, 85% of us are on gas boilers. I think that's probably around about the number. So at the moment, we're so bad at putting heat pumps in, exception to the rule here. Like, we can just throw as many heat pumps in as possible because there's just no immediate problem with doing that. What will happen eventually, however, is that we'll find we don't have enough electricity to power our heating during those very, very few times of hours in the day where everybody wants to turn on the heating, basically. So there's a bit of a balance and a bit of the government needs a bit of a longer term strategy on this and work out what the solutions to that are. Heat pumps, get them more efficient, great, that reduces our demand. Time of use, so get people switching so we're not all doing it exactly the same time. That's a really good thing to do, so we're not all heating at the same time. But then the fabric retrofit is going to enable heat pumps, because if everybody had a heat pump tomorrow, the grid would explode. If everybody had a retrofit tomorrow and had a really efficient heat pump and used time of day, we would only need a few more power stations, to keep all the lights on and keep all the heating on. So the interaction between your choices in your home and the retrofit schemes that are happening and the renewables that you're putting on your house, the interactions that those have with the national grid and the capability of a nation to provide enough power to those homes, that peak heat, kind of during those peak heat periods, is critical. And actually, that's what's probably driving fabric retrofit policy, is to be able to enable heat pump delivery. So that they need each other, essentially. And then the gas can, maybe be kept in certain areas or phased or whatever as a long-term kind of future in which there's lots of different things that could happen with gas.
Is there a role for some sort of hybrid here where you can reduce 75% or 80% of gas demand in people's home by using a heat pump most of the time, and then you're not designing a system for peak electrification, if you like?
Yeah, so for people who don't know, what that is, essentially you have two systems in tandem, however it's designed. So you got your heat pump for your day-to-day stuff, and then suddenly it gets really cold and everyone turns it on. No worries, my gas boiler can kick in and take that off the grid so that the grid doesn't explode. So that's the same principle around having batteries. So your battery could kick in and to provide the extra heat, so you're off-gridded, etc. So we're actually doing some research on heat pumps at the moment. We're installing kind of side-by-side hybrids versus standard heat pumps up at a test facility in the north. And we're trying to investigate that sort of question. How much does it save on your peak demand? How much does that affect your bills and all that sort of stuff? So it's a relevant question, of course.
Okay. Any other questions, please?
Hi. Thank you. Hi, Claire Townley, Retrofits of Laughter. Blame my son for that title. Jim half pinched my question already, but I was going to ask the panel, do you practice what you preach? What are you doing yourselves in your own homes and lives? And if you aren't, why not?
I'll quickly jump in and I'll be shamed here. So I'm a living case study for the problems that we've been talking about regards customers. So I live in a cavity-walled home with no cavity wall insulation in it. Why? Well, when we look to do cavity wall insulation, the design is... Do you remember the old 1970s chalet bungalows? And they put these decorative stones in the concrete blockwork to make it look interesting. And of course, what that does is it disrupts your cavity, so you don't no longer have a perfect sort of cavity to just blow in a load of insulation. So, okay, fair enough. Well, we'll just render it, and at some point, maybe, I don't know, there'll be a solution. And then we started the process. We were completely renovating our entire house, and then the Green Homes Grant came up. Does anyone remember the Green Homes Grant? It's like this last minute, oh God, we've got loads of money left, quick, spend it. We managed to get a voucher for some insulation, but then we're like, right, okay, we'll get EWI, we'll get external wall insulation on our cavity wall home because it's got this difficulty. And it took ages, and then I finally arranged it, and they said, oh, actually, if you want the EWI bit of the rendering, because we needed to re-render the whole house, it's going to be another 4 months before we can get it. And my wife is just like, we're living in a building site. No, just render the house. And so these are the practical things. People have lives. They can't just put everything else on hold. So I do look at my house every time I put the heating on and go, oh, what have I missed there? But it's a really valid point. I've got one more shameful thing as well. So Just one, yeah. So we got an extension, and I think this is a really important point. The interaction between a retrofit and an extension, it's a home improvement, it's a new kitchen. We actually got an extension to our house, converted the garage, and I never like to tell the builders that I'm a building sort of scientist. 'Cause, you don't know, you get into conversations you don't want to have. And there's one good thing and one bad thing that I did. So the good thing was the installer, the plasterer, got asked to put the loft insulation in, and it's a bit of a shallow roof. And they made an absolute pig's ear of it because they're a plasterer and they were being told to do it. So this is an interesting point about the regulations and standards. An extension isn't covered under PAS 2035. There are no compliance requirements, no carding, no competency purchase schemes for an extension. It just comes under general building regulations. And general building regulations are assessed by building control officers who just check it won't burn down and it won't fall down. And they don't come and check all of these sort of thermal moisture-related issues. So I ended up getting into the loft, ripping it all out and redoing it all. So that was my saving grace. But I did notice when they were building, they would leave the cavity wall. They actually insulated this cavity wall because it's new. But it was raining a lot. And they'd switched the specification to an insulation which I knew would get damaged in the rain. So then I've got that discussion of, do I annoy my builder and risk them walking off site by saying, excuse me, my insulation's getting wet, rip it out and put new in, please? Or do I do what everyone else is going to do, especially if you didn't know that was a problem, just live with a cold extension, know that your home is underperforming. So these personal lives get in the way of our kind of ambitions. That's my shame. Hopefully,
I'll have a go at my lived experience. A couple of things. How do you know if someone's got a heat pump? Wait 2 minutes and they'll tell you. So I find that once you've got a heat pump, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You have to talk about how great it is, even if it's not. So that's the first point. The second bit is, when I joined Octopus 4 years ago, I had no renewables in my house at all. And I had oil, because we're an off-gas village, off-gas village just outside York. And so I got panels put in, put batteries in, got an EV car, got a heat pump all at once. Nightmare. Lots of, basically, everyone who works for Octopus in Yorkshire knows me because they've been in my house. Yeah, and it's hugely disruptive. What happens?
Every time they come.
Well, tell me about it. I've got nice plushy octopuses that I kind of give to them and try and keep them all sweet, and I give them biscuits and I chat to them about how installs are going, back to your piece around retrofit. But I was on oil, so the economic case is massive because they were coming around, and I wasn't in a buying syndicate. They came and just filled up this oil thing, 1,500 quid a pop, and it's painful, right? So I could see the real benefits of it. But here's the killer bit for me, and it's kind of sacrilege. I don't care about my heating system, and even worse, I'm not really interested in it. I don't come down in the morning skipping, woohoo, look at my coefficient of performance, let's mess about with my solar panels, look, I've got an extra 2%. I don't care. Right? It just needs to work, right? You've just got to be living your life normally. My daughter is here today, but I won't point her out, but that was one of the people who supports Middlesbrough, so I was very pleased about that. Came home from university and had the temerity to have a shower in the middle of the afternoon. And so I had to fiddle about with the heat pump settings to put the heating on, to do the hot water at the right time, which I did, and it works, but I had to faff. So my steer on the lived experience is, yes, I top up my batteries overnight with 7.5 pence electricity. I run the house off cheap electricity in the morning, tops up in the afternoon with the solar. My heat pump heats the hot water overnight at like 2 and 3 in the morning. Therefore, I'm paying that 7.5p. My bills have drastically reduced, but I had to spend, let's go, 18 grand. And not everyone's got £18,000. So to your desirability, yep. Hassle-free, kind of once it's in, yeah. But is it affordable? No, and that's why the social justice piece has to come to the fore. We've got to make it for everybody and not just for the few.
We've all got tales to tell. So I live in one of the highest parts of Leeds. I'm up by the airport, and Christmas Eve 2023, there was a storm. I can't quite remember the name of it. It blew part of our roof off. And then, because it was Christmas, Christmas Day, Boxing Day, the 27th, our insurance company were unable or unwilling, let's say, to come out, and it rained heavily for 5 days. So our house was flooded from top downwards. We moved out for 6 months, took it back to brick, and because of that, we were out. We had our entire roof insulation and internal wall insulation replaced, and because we were out, we also put in triple glazing. So our home is now extremely warm and quieter, significantly quieter. We live by the airport. So I would not want to relive that experience, but I am an advocate for knowing the value of having those roof and wall insulation and windows, and what those energy efficient measures that they can bring.
I think this one's working now. Wow, it's brilliant. So I am in the able to pay market, but I don't like to call it that. I like to call it the willing to pay market. So I'm very lucky that I had an extension similar to David about 10 years ago and insulated my home very well, put new windows and doors in, but I didn't have any renewables. I didn't have an air source heat pump. My boiler went pop 2 years ago, and at that point, that's when I had to do the changeover to air source heat pumps, because I come on these panels and people ask me, what am I doing? And I needed an answer to that. I guess I've got a small solar installation on my roof. It is not enough to reduce my bills down to what Jim has just spoken about. What I'm really interested in is the local power plan and community energy, because there are plenty of properties out there that are not fit for the right orientation of solar, and that everyone can benefit from larger scale community energy in the future.
Thank you. Right, someone was, very quick last question.
I don't need mine quite loud.
Oh, well, I have a job to do.
Oh, thanks. I won't shout into it then. You've all mentioned the importance of like changing the narrative and focusing on not on affordability, etc. And I think that was, Andrew, your like big unlock. But how is that going to happen consistently across the industry?
So, for me, from an private companies essentially driving this, we need a pipeline that we talked about and a long-term policy. Part of that is the language change that we're talking about. For me, it is a very tricky one to navigate. DESNZ are starting to change the narrative across this. You'll start to see it. We now call the Social Housing Decarb Fund the Warm Homes Fund. So you're starting to see that language change. So it's not going to be overnight. I am one of those people that we spoke about earlier that wants to see change overnight. I've come to the realization over the last few years this is going to be a steady plan over time. Do I think we're going to hit our 2050 targets? Probably not. But for me, it is about setting the standards and the targets in place that we come near as damn it. So that's me.
Thank you. Brilliant. Just a big round of applause, if I may, for our fantastic panellists.